The billionaire model who vanished without a trace. Your worst disappearance probably involved unanswered messages, a phone switched off, a life quietly drifting away from the people who once knew you. Hers involved Fifth Avenue, midday, white gloves, a silk dress, and a family powerful enough to make problems disappear. In December 1910, New York was already the most modern city on Earth. Electric streetlights glowed against winter fog. Department stores glittered like palaces. Newspapers claimed that no secret could survive in a city this loud, this crowded, this watched. And yet, on an ordinary afternoon, a young woman stepped onto the sidewalk near Central Park and was never seen again. No witnesses, no ransom note, no blood, no body. Her name was Dorothy Arnold. She was not poor. She was not reckless. She was not unknown. Dorothy was a socialite, a model, and the daughter of one of America's most powerful oil families. She moved through elite drawing rooms where money whispered instead of shouted. Her future had already been written by men who believed wealth was protection and reputation was everything. And still, she vanished. Not from a train station. Not from a harbor. Not from some distant frontier. She disappeared in Manhattan, in daylight. At the height of her family's influence, the city searched. The police speculated. The newspapers circled like vultures. But the trail ended almost as soon as it began, swallowed by silence, discretion, and the quiet machinery of old money. What happened to Dorothy Arnold was never solved. What happened after her disappearance may be even more disturbing. Because this is not just the story of a missing woman. It is the story of a society that could afford answers and chose not to find them. This is the story of the heiress who had everything except the freedom to exist on her own terms. Dorothy Harriet Camille Arnold was born in 1885 into a world already decided for her. She did not enter life as a blank page, but as a continuation of a family ledger. The Arnolds were not new money. They did not flaunt wealth. They managed it. Their fortune was rooted in American oil and high finance, the kind that did not make headlines but quietly shaped markets, railroads, and political access. Dorothy's father, Francis R. Arnold, moved comfortably among industrialists and bankers who believed that money, when handled correctly, should never attract attention. From the outside, Dorothy's childhood looked idyllic. She grew up surrounded by elegance, private tutors, refined manners, and the invisible rules of upper-class America. She attended elite schools designed not to teach independence, but discipline, not curiosity, but restraint. Young women of her class were trained to become wives who reflected well on the family name, not individuals with ambitions of their own. But even early on, Dorothy did not fit neatly into that design. She was intelligent, observant, quietly restless. Teachers described her as sensitive but sharp. Friends noticed she questioned things others accepted without thought. She read novels considered too emotional, too modern, too inappropriate for a young woman expected to marry well and disappear into respectability. By her late teens, cracks began to form. Dorothy was drawn to the world of fashion and modeling, a pursuit her family tolerated publicly but viewed privately as embarrassing. Modeling at the time hovered dangerously close to performance and visibility. And visibility was something old money women were taught to avoid. A woman who was seen too much invited speculation. Speculation invited gossip. Gossip threatened legacy. At home, expectations tightened. Marriage was discussed not as romance, but as strategy. Suitable men were introduced. Conversations were monitored. Financial allowances were controlled. Independence, emotional or financial, was treated as a liability. Dorothy began to feel the weight of what could not be said. She wanted affection that was not negotiated, work that was not ornamental, a future she could recognize as her own. Family friends later recalled tension, quiet arguments, periods where Dorothy seemed withdrawn, then suddenly animated when speaking about escape, travel, or a life beyond drawing rooms and supervised walks. There were rumors of romantic disappointment, of a relationship her parents disapproved of letters intercepted, of decisions made for her, not with her. Nothing explosive, nothing scandalous enough to make headlines. Just the slow suffocation of a young woman who understood, perhaps too clearly, that her life had already been assigned. In old money families, rebellion rarely announces itself loudly. It simmers. And by 1910, Dorothy Arnold was no longer simply a daughter of privilege. She was a woman standing at the edge of a life she did not choose, quietly deciding what it might cost to step away from it. On the morning of the 12th of December, 1910, Dorothy Arnold left her family's home as she had done countless times before. There was nothing theatrical about it. No dramatic argument, no raised voices, no slammed doors. She dressed carefully, but not extravagantly. A tailored outfit suitable for a young woman of her standing. White gloves, a hat pulled low enough to be proper, high enough to see the street. She told her mother she was going out to buy an evening gown for her sister's debutante party. It was an ordinary excuse, one no one would question. Dorothy stepped into the city. New York in 1910 was alive with movement. Streetcars clattered past polished storefronts. Shoppers moved between department stores, bookshops, and cafes. It was a city that prided itself on progress, order, and visibility. People noticed each other. People remembered faces. That is what makes what happened next so unsettling. Dorothy was seen that day. Briefly. Casually. In ways that felt too normal to matter at the time. She purchased a box of chocolates. She browsed books at a shop near Fifth Avenue. She exchanged polite words with a friend, mentioning nothing unusual, nothing urgent. She did not appear distressed. She did not appear rushed. She did not behave like someone preparing to disappear. At some point, she turned down a familiar street and continued on foot. That was the last confirmed sighting. When Dorothy failed to return home that evening, concern was muted. Young women of her class often stayed out late. A night with friends required no explanation. By morning, concern sharpened into alarm. By afternoon, the realization settled in. Something was wrong. Her belongings remained untouched. Her luggage was still packed where it always had been. She had withdrawn only a small amount of cash. Too little to start a new life. Too much to be an accident. There was no note. No message left with a friend. No train ticket. No ship passage booked. If Dorothy had planned to run, she had done so with a carelessness that defied logic. And if she had not planned to run, then her disappearance was something far more disturbing. The city began to search, but quietly. The family requested discretion. Detectives were consulted. Questions were asked behind closed doors. The press was informed only selectively. Days passed. Then weeks. Then months. The trail did not grow cold. It ended. In a city designed to record movement, to document transactions, to notice absence, Dorothy Arnold vanished as if she had stepped out of history itself. And with every passing day, the question became harder to ignore. If this was not escape, and not accident, then what kind of world allows a woman to disappear so completely and leave nothing behind but uncertainty? At first, the Arnolds believed the problem could be solved quietly. They had money. They had influence. They had connections that reached far beyond police precincts and newspaper offices. In families like theirs, crises were not announced. They were managed. Private detectives were hired almost immediately. Men who specialized in discretion rather than spectacle. They retraced Dorothy's final movements, revisited the shops she had entered, questioned clerks who barely remembered her face. Fifth Avenue was searched inch by inch, not with panic, but with method. Nothing surfaced. When the New York Police Department became formally involved, they faced an uncomfortable truth. There was no crime scene, no sign of struggle, no evidence of theft or violence. Dorothy Arnold had not vanished in a way that fit any existing category, and so the theories began. Some believed she had been abducted. Kidnapping was not unheard of, even among the wealthy. But kidnappers demanded money. They made themselves known. No ransom ever arrived. No threat followed. No negotiation was offered. Others whispered suicide. A young woman, emotionally fragile. Romantic disappointment. Pressure from family. Central Park was searched. Rivers were dragged. Hospitals were contacted. Morgues checked and rechecked. There was no body. Another theory suggested murder, perhaps by someone she trusted. A secret relationship gone wrong. An argument turned fatal. But again, there was no blood, no witness, no sudden disappearance of a suspect. The more sensational papers began to speculate about white slavery. The idea that a beautiful young woman could be taken and sold into exploitation gripped the public imagination. It was horrifying, and impossible to disprove. Every explanation shared one common flaw. There was no evidence. As weeks passed, the case attracted attention not because of progress, but because of absence. Reporters noted how quickly the family withdrew from public appeals, how little information was released, how controlled every statement became. In another family, grief might have been loud. In this one, it was contained. The Arnolds did not offer a reward large enough to dominate headlines. They did not allow Dorothy's face to be plastered endlessly across the city. Instead, they worked behind the scenes, funneling inquiries through lawyers and trusted intermediaries. To some, This looked like composure. To others, it looked like something else entirely. People began to ask questions not about where Dorothy was, but about why her disappearance was being handled so carefully, why certain rumors were dismissed quickly, why others were never addressed at all. Old money had always understood something new money never fully grasped. Scandal is not survived by confrontation, it is survived by silence. And yet, silence did not bring answers. Months turned into years, detectives gave up, leads evaporated, witnesses forgot. The city moved on to newer tragedies, newer distractions. Dorothy Arnold remained unresolved, not officially dead, not officially alive, just absent. Her disappearance exposed an unsettling truth. Wealth could open doors, bend institutions, and protect reputations, but it could not reconstruct a moment that left no trace. And as the investigation faded, another question began to rise in its place. Was the failure to find Dorothy Arnold the result of an unsolvable mystery, or the outcome of choices made to ensure that some truths would never surface at all? As the investigation stalled, something else became increasingly visible. The Arnolds were not escalating their search. They were retreating from it. Public appeals faded. Detectives were dismissed one by one. Statements to the press grew shorter, colder, more carefully worded. Dorothy's name, once spoken with urgency, began to disappear from polite conversation altogether. In old money families, tragedy is not processed in public. It is absorbed. Behind closed doors, the family continued to live as though order itself could undo loss. Dinner parties were small. Social obligations were honored. Appearances were maintained with meticulous discipline. To the outside world, it looked like resilience. To those who watched closely, it looked like erasure. Years later, rumors surfaced that the family had quietly decided Dorothy was dead, that a private consensus had been reached, even without proof. That acknowledging uncertainty was more dangerous than accepting the worst. There were whispers of letters, of a possible pregnancy, of a forbidden relationship that threatened the family's standing. None were ever confirmed, none were ever denied. The Arnolds never officially declared Dorothy deceased, but they behaved as though her story had ended. Her room was left untouched for a time, then quietly dismantled. Personal effects vanished into storage. Her name was avoided in conversation. In public records, she slowly transformed from a missing person into a footnote. This was not cruelty. It was protocol. Old money understands something deeply unsettling. Unresolved truth is corrosive. It eats away at legacy, at alliances, at perception. Silence, by contrast, stabilizes. And so, the family chose containment over curiosity. The city followed their lead. Without pressure, the case died. Without noise, memory faded. New York built upward and outward, swallowing the streets where Dorothy had last been seen. The world moved on, as it always does, leaving behind only unanswered questions. But silence has consequences. Because when a woman disappears and no one is allowed to ask why, the absence becomes heavier than any explanation ever could. Dorothy Arnold was not granted the dignity of a conclusion. She was denied even the chaos of scandal. Her life was reduced to a blank space between social columns, a problem deemed unsolvable and therefore unnecessary to pursue. In protecting the family name, something else was lost. Not just a daughter, but the truth of what her life had cost her. And that silence, carefully constructed and fiercely guarded, would outlive every rumor, every theory, every investigation, because silence is the most powerful inheritance old money ever passes down. Dorothy Arnold was never found. There was no body to bury, no grave to visit, no final headline to close the story. Her disappearance slipped quietly into the margins of history, where unresolved lives often end up mentioned briefly, then overshadowed by louder tragedies, clearer endings, cleaner narratives. The Arnold family eventually passed away, one by one. Their wealth endured, their name survived. New generations inherited fortunes without inheriting the questions that once haunted them. New York changed. The streets Dorothy walked were rebuilt, storefronts replaced. The city rose higher, faster, louder. The moment she vanished became just another date in an old police ledger, another curiosity for historians and true crime writers. And yet, more than a century later, her absence still unsettles. Because Dorothy Arnold did not leave behind a scandal that could be consumed and discarded. She left a void, a silence so complete it forces reflection. Was she a runaway who underestimated the cost of freedom? A victim of violence concealed by privilege and discretion? A woman erased not by crime, but by a system that found her inconvenient? History cannot answer these questions. but it can tell us what her story represents. Dorothy Arnold was a woman born into extraordinary wealth and extraordinary limitation. She lived in a world where comfort was abundant, but autonomy was scarce, where reputation mattered more than truth, where silence was considered a virtue, especially when it protected power. Her legacy is not one of glamour or triumph. It is a warning that wealth does not guarantee safety, that status does not ensure visibility, that for women, especially those born into gilded cages, disappearance can be both literal and symbolic. In the end, Dorothy Arnold became something old money never intended. Uncontrollable, not because she rebelled loudly, not because she destroyed her family's name, but because she vanished in a way that could never be fully explained, never fully owned, and never fully forgotten. She proved that titles fade, fortunes disperse, reputations are curated, but unresolved truth endures. And perhaps that is why her story still lingers. Because somewhere between Fifth Avenue and silence, Dorothy Arnold reminds us that the most disturbing mysteries are not the ones filled with violence, but the ones protected by restraint. What do you think happened to her? Let us know in the comments below.